Hello, and welcome to the Digital CxO podcast. I'm Amanda Razani, and I'm excited to be here today with German Soto Sanchez, the Chief Strategy Officer of Broadridge. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Amanda, and thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on our show. So first, can you share a little bit of information about Broadridge? What are the services that are provided? And then maybe your background, please.
Sure, no problem. So Broadridge is a global fintech. It's a company that's a member of the S&P 500. We're a $25 billion company. We have about 15,000 associates on a global basis. In terms of what we do, we essentially power investing, governance, and communications. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you've ever bought a share of a company, then Broadridge, played a role in that, right? From the point of view of the actual trade to execute the purchase of that share, we provide infrastructure to capital markets firms, wealth firms, asset managers to help empower things like trading. And then once you own the share, if you receive a prospectus, or an annual report or semi-annual report, our communication solutions provide, those types of communications for you, even things like virtual shareholder meetings. And then, if you ever voted as part of the governance process of being a shareholder, a proxy statement, for example, we also help facilitate that, right? So we really cover sort of the process of, investing, communications, and governance, through that cycle. And that's the critical role that we play. Just for a little bit of perspective on that from a stats point of view, so we process, billions of communications per year as a result of that. We process around 10 trillion of fixed income and equity trades per day. And on top of that, from a wealth perspective, for example, about 30% of wealth advisors in North America leverage our platform in some capacity. So it's very far-reaching, perspective that we have across the global financial markets.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to talk today about your recent digital transformation and next-gen survey that you conducted. Can you share a little bit about what led y'all to conduct this survey? What was the reasoning behind it? And then we can start talking about some of the results.
Yeah, sure. So the survey, really helps us get a sense around our customer base and how our customers are thinking about transformation. As I mentioned beforehand, we're very much invested in sort of powering investing, communications, and governance. And part of the way we do that is we provide platforms and infrastructure that our customers leverage. And these are platforms and infrastructure that go hand in hand, helping our customers sort of digitize, right, to transform themselves, digitally. And so from that perspective, as we thought about sort of what are the trends that are driving our customers' ability to invest and latch on to digitization, that was part of the nexus of what the survey came from. And so we do the survey annually. And the way we conduct the survey is we do have a wide sample of companies that participate on a global basis. Typically we look at, close to 500 companies, C-level and senior executives across these companies, multiple countries, and try to get a sense of how are they stack up against a set of markers, right? We look at it as 10 different dimensions that we think are very critical for digital transformation. And we ask them questions that help us assess where these companies stack up against these 10, different markers of digital transformation leadership.
Great. So let's get started with some of the results. So one of the interesting stats, 75% of firms are confident in their digital transformation journey, yet only about a third have reached the advanced stages of CX, modernization, and data management. So what are your thoughts on this, and where is the roadblock?
Yeah, so, in terms of a lot of companies, as we look at that, what we identified is there's a difference between companies we classify as leaders and companies that we classify as non-leaders, right? And what we've noticed is over time, the leaders are pulling away from the non-leaders. And sort of the stat you just mentioned, for example, when we look at sort of those areas, those are areas that we consider to be foundational areas, right? So I mentioned we look at about 10 different dimensions, 10 different markers. When we look at things like data management, automation, sort of core IT that's modern, those are foundational elements, especially for digital transformation. And so what we're seeing is sort of companies that are the leaders are investing heavily in that to establish that foundation of which they build upon. And so that's something that we've noticed sort of on a go-forward basis. Obviously, the leaders have invested much more than the non-leaders, and we're seeing that sort of that gap increase slightly over time as well.
Mm-hmm. And then our next stat, 70% of leaders indicate that they are prioritizing their AI investments in customer interaction to fuel meaningful customer engagement. So how are they determining the return on investment here? And how are they seeing if it's returning that meaningful customer engagement?
Yeah, so look, I think return on investment on AI is a very challenging thing for a number of folks to measure. And I do think we were exiting sort of a stage of, heavy focused investment on AI and sort of waiting to see. I think now we're entering the stage of, hey, let's see what are the returns on some of these AI investments. When you look at the leaders are definitely sort of big, heavy investors in AI. We've also seen that aside from the leaders, some of the larger companies, right? So some of the larger companies in our sample set are also big investors in AI. And what we're also looking at is where are they investing in as well? And so some of these, heavy investors in AI are very much focused on front office. What does that mean? It means that they're focused on areas that are interacting directly with the customers versus things that represent more back office or middle office type operations. So they're focused on sort of customer interaction activities. They're focused on activities that relate to customer onboarding, for example, or activities around service or sales and marketing. And the reason that really matters is that you can get sort of pretty instantaneous feedback in terms of the impact, that use of AI in these areas is having, whether it's sort of enhanced customer experience or you're generating more sales, more revenue, or more satisfied customers overall. And so we're seeing the investments go in those areas. And I think those are some of the areas where you start to see some of the initial benefits overall. I think as time passes by, you'll see more front office, but you're going to start to see a little bit more in the middle and the back office, right? Those are areas that touch upon things like risk or operations or compliance. And eventually you'll see it in other areas like security or training, et cetera, which will be more sort of around corporate or IT priorities as well.
And of course, we're hearing a lot about the AI implementation, but did your survey touch on other technologies that business leaders are trying to harness or implement?
Absolutely. And so AI is one. So we also looked at sort of what folks would consider to be next gen technologies, right? And around sort of these next generation technologies, like which are the ones that people are very, very much focused on. So one example I'll highlight in regards to next gen technology is blockchain or distributed ledger. And so there we see sort of a number of folks expressing sort of interest and activity in the area of distributed ledger. And so, that's one of the key sort of areas of emerging technology that comes up. But other areas that have come up as well include folks looking at things like quantum computing, for example, is another area that has come up. I think that one is a little bit further down the road. I think Gen AI is at the top. We're seeing sort of other emerging things such as quantum, then other sort of things on the horizon, such as what we mentioned around, quantum, et cetera, as well.
What are some other key takeaways from that survey that you can share? Any other important stats that came from that survey?
Yeah, look, I think fundamentally, it's very important to get engaged, right? It's very important to be active. And the proof is here, right? Companies that invest are likely to reap the benefits and become more mature and become leaders in digital transformation. And digital transformation is something that then allows you to provide sort of a much more compelling offering to your customers. And what I mean by that, look, engaging doesn't just have to be sort of investing sort of huge sums of dollars. And I think that's something that comes out very clear. I think, you have companies that you could not just invest, but you can experiment. And you can experiment. It doesn't have to take a lot to experiment. Some of the companies, for example, in blockchain that have experimented in blockchain, these are companies that essentially started off with something as simple as minting Bitcoin. It doesn't take a significant budget to do that. But once you experiment, you start to get a sense of what this entails. You also start to learn about it, and you have people that start to learn about it as well, because we have to build up that talent base. Another thing that you can do is just sort of engage with the ecosystem, right? So you experiment, but also engage with the ecosystem, right? Engage with other companies that are like-minded. Engage with trade organizations, that support what you're trying to do. Engage with academics, right? Engage with sort of investment bankers, venture capitalists, other investors, and engage with peers as well, right? There's so many different ways to engage with the ecosystem that provides you with another opportunity to learn and, again, to become engaged overall with the opportunities and with digital transformation. I think the final area I'll highlight is partner. Right. And so you can always also partner with somebody, partner with an entity or startup, et cetera, to, again, get involved. And so that's one of the things that, it's very clear here is that, there is a widening of the gap between leaders and non-leaders, but you want to get engaged because, once you get engaged, you really start to see the benefits overall. And it doesn't take a huge multi-billion-dollar or multi-million-dollar budget to engage.
So what are some of the tips that you have for business leaders when it comes to getting all the staff adopting this technology? And also from an education standpoint, there's a bit of a skills gap sometimes. So what are your tips for providing education to the staff?
Yeah, look, I think we think that there are several aspects to this, right? There is a skills gap, and it's critical to close the skills gap. So training, has to be a critical dimension of this. As we think about sort of and that's one of the core dimensions that we highlight when it comes to the 10 dimensions that I mentioned. One of them is around culture. It's around talent, right? It's around the people that you have and the digital skills and the talent that they do have. And so what we see is when we look at companies that are leaders, for example, right, the leaders, they invest in these areas, but nevertheless, there's a huge difference. When I say huge difference it's almost a 6x difference in terms of, the percent of leaders that are what we call in the advanced stages of talent and the percent of non-leaders that are in the advanced stages of talent. So there is a noticeable gap in terms of the investment there. And, what we encourage everyone to do again is it just takes a little start, right? So a number of companies that we have observed is they start training at the top, right? And then so they disseminate from the top to the next layer and the next layer and the next layer, right? And you pick up the evangelists along the way who can then further evangelize with these emerging technologies and this training to other people, organizations. The reason that really matters is because that also helps you identify use cases, right? And as you identify use cases and those people are evangelizing it, they can then sort of mobilize the more junior ranks, to be active and engaged in that. And so it's very critical. We've seen a number of firms that really pursue that, which is let's make sure we get the buy-in from the top. You have the buy-in at the bottom, and sometimes you have very enthusiastic junior people that are embracing these emerging technologies, that are embracing AI, that are embracing blockchain, that are interested in quantum. But if they're the only ones that are interested, it's not going to be significant traction that you need. So you do have a little bit bottoms up, but you really need some top-down evangelization as well.
Awesome. So if there was one final thought that you could leave our audience with today, what would that be?
I think it's one of the things that, was very noticeable in terms of our survey is around sort of customer obsession. And what I mean by that is I think in the past, there's always been significant focus on we want to be efficient, we want to be sort of very cost-centric, et cetera. What we're seeing now is in order to better serve your customers, you have to be advanced when it comes to creating sort of a seamless digital experience for your customers, right? Customers are now looking to engage, right? And so how is it that you better engage your customers, right? And that's the next frontier of providing your customers a richer experience. And that's where digital transformation comes in, right? Digital transformation comes in because when you think about what does it take to provide our customers with that next level client experience, oh, wait a second. That's really hard to do unless we transform ourselves because the way we've normally been doing it, it's not going to cut it. And so We don't want it to be lost in all of this, that fundamentally it comes down to the customers and the kind of experience that they want. And a great way to highlight this is, as we all emerge from the pandemic, right? The pandemic let us realize that sort of digital transformation was needed, especially as the channels of interaction were changing. You went from what was sort of a brick and mortar world into a virtual world, different channels of interaction that for companies that were not digitally ready, was very difficult, right? And that's the same thing with digital transformation as a whole. Fundamentally, we're talking about our customers and how do we orient ourselves against sort of these 10 markers of success when it comes to digital transformation to better serve our customers. So let's just not lose sight on customer needs and what our customers want.
Yeah, absolutely. And those needs are only increasing in this digital world. They expect a lot more than they used to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today and sharing your insights and the results of the survey. And I want to thank our audience also for tuning in. Let us know what interested you the most from this conversation and have a wonderful day. Thanks again.